I'm Nate Eaton talking with Keith Morrison for a story that I had not heard about that's coming up on Dateline on Friday until just this week. It's called On a Dark, Deserted Highway. Keith, let me read to you the explanation. A deadly high-speed chase in Montana leads Dateline on a search through 50 years of history to unravel the mystery of how one man turned into a monster and committed one of the state's most notorious crimes.
Yeah.
What a story.
Yes, it was a very big deal in Montana, certainly in the part of Montana where it happened. And the legal process was torturous, to say the least. But so was this guy and this guy's life. And we were, we'd heard about Shane Bishop, my producing partner, who you know well, grew up in Montana. He knows the place well. He knows the people there well. And he was hearing a lot about this case. And it's not this sort of story that we often do on Dateline, exactly. But it was just fascinating. And we started to look into this guy. How did he get to be this way? That was you hear about people who are behaving crazily in the world, and you wonder, where'd that come from? Well, that's the question we asked. Where'd that come from? And we dug deeply into this man's past, and we discovered an absolutely fascinating story, which, begins in your state, actually, or much of it happens there.
Yeah, talk about the tie to Idaho, because there is an Idaho tie.
There is. I mean, he started out there. He was a faithful LDS member. He went on a mission trip early in his life. He got married young, as many people do after a mission trip. He came home and married the childhood sweetheart he had romanced before he left, and was set on what appeared to be a kind of a traditional kind of LDS life. The sort of person who would wind up being a bishop because he was a smart guy. And then things happened. Things began to happen. And he started to go down a very, very different sort of trail. And we're able to follow him. Just the evolution of attitudes is a fascinating thing. And it's not normally something we're able to do as much as we're able to do here. What a story it makes, my goodness.
Sure. Would you say that it's kind of a story of religious extremism to a point?
Well, yes and no. I mean, this man could have been a religious extremist. He could have been a political extremist. Like there's right, and he went that way instead of that way.
Yeah.
But he, extremist is the right word, and he, extremism is not in itself necessarily a bad thing. It's what you do with it, and that's what landed us where we were. I must say also that when you kind of get to the end of that highway, or on that dark, deserted highway, what happens there on video and audio, as recorded by body cams and dash cams of police vehicles, is the most dramatic conclusion to a chase I think I've ever seen. It looks like a Wild West movie.
Speeds are 100 miles an hour.
You kept calling out.
438. That's his badge number.
I need medical. Send backup units.
Oh my God, he's down. He's down.
They told me that he was shot, and I just felt like we had all let him down.
Dispatch told us that there was a deputy in Broadwater County that had been shot.
I just said, God, come ride with me.
I remember going around a big sweeping corner, and all of a sudden it's just pops and muzzle flashes coming out the back window.
I threw my AR up over the steering wheel and started to exchange gunfire.
They had to be stopped. They had no regard for anybody's life.
Lloyd, he had the boys convinced that there was going to be a war with the U.S. government.
These are the little boys you gave birth to.
They were conditioned to have such aberrant beliefs and aberrant behaviors.
It sounds like they were out to kill as many people as they could and go down in a blaze of glory.
I wanted to try and stop him somehow. I was hoping there was something that could help me.
I was born to do this, Mother, what I'm doing.
I think that this is probably one of the most savage and dangerous people that I've ever seen.
This is an ambush of a law enforcement officer who was just trying to go home.
Let's call it what it was, an execution.
I think he's one of the most evil people we've ever dealt with.
This is one where it never goes away.
I've thought so many times, maybe if I'd gone back 40 years and made a different choice, Officer Moore would still be alive.
All he wanted to do was to try to make this a better place and leave his mark, and I think he did.
And you do talk with the sheriff who was involved and the police dispatcher.
Well, yes, and the deputy who was most deeply involved and about whom we speak. And that's the other end of this story, and it's a very important one because it is, and we never take sides, by the way, in these things. We just try to report the facts. But what was plainly apparent, and what we knew we had to talk about, was these people who kind of dedicate their lives to keeping their fellow citizens secure and safe. And they do it with a very small number of people, kind of down-home sheriff's offices who have maybe 12 officers to cover an area the size of, I don't know, Rhode Island. And they do it willingly and happily, and then somebody comes along and thinks that they're the big bad enemy, and watch out. The sheriff was affected in ways you don't normally see a police officer affected, and that was kind of a moving thing.
Sure. So I'm sure that a lot of our viewers are saying, Keith just did a Dateline on the University of Idaho murders. There's the multiple Datelines on the Vallow Daybell case. There's Chris Tapp, which is another story from our area. Do you have a particular affinity for Idaho? Is that why these stories keep coming up, or you just find the interesting stories and go after them?
I blame you, Nate.
It's all me.
But it's a state. Things have happened there. It's a rich source for us, that's for sure. And I mean, Idaho is a wonderful state. I love Idaho. Love going there too. Maybe that's part of the reason.
Yeah,
true. You're right.
Do you have any other projects in the works? Any future podcasts coming out that you can tell us about?
Well, in fact, I'm working on one right now, a podcast which will be released in a month or so, in March, early March. And I can't tell you a whole lot about it now, except it's a bright blue Mustang and a young woman.
Awesome. All right. We'll watch for that. We'll also watch Dateline. It airs here in Idaho at 8 o'clock, other parts of the country on the East and West Coast, 9 o'clock Friday. It's 2 hours on a dark, deserted highway, one of Montana's most notorious crimes that you may not have even heard about until now.